today's episode. So we are into Arya 3, another kind of shorter chapter, but there's still a good amount to break down from here. Especially when it comes to like what's going on in the Riverlands, the Brotherhood Without Banners. We get some of that kind of behind the scenes of the war. A lot of it's like hearsay, which is always really cool. And you can really always take a lot of those quotes and like just run wild with them. So what we have here today is Hot Pie has decided to stay with Sharna as a baker at the inn. The others depart for River Run, or so Tom tells Arya. Harwin tells Arya the tale of how they first rode out in search of Gregor Clegane and about all the men they lost when Gregor's men fell on them. Most of the 120 men from the original group are dead, including Lothar Mallory and Gladden Wild. It was a trap. Lord Tywin had planned for Eddard himself to ride out to deal with Gregor, but Jaime didn't know of the plan when he attacked Ned in the streets of King's Landing. As Eddard's leg was broken, he had to send others out. Beric Dondarrion and his men learned a sharp lesson when the trap sprung. Dondarrion should have died, having been run through with a lance, but Thoros of Myr saved him. After Tywin became Hand of the King, they became outlaws themselves, but they kept fighting in the name of King Robert. They harried the foraging parties and attacked the attacked the baggage trains of Tywin's armies, and their brotherhood began to grow as many flocked to their cause, mostly commoners uprooted by the war. Later, when they met up with Greenbeard and learned that Jaime Lannister had escaped from River Run, when Arya discovers that they mean to bring her before Lord Beric rather than take her to River Run, she tries to ride off, but Harwin catches her. Her father's man is now a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners and answers only to Beric and Thoros, Lord of Light, the god R'hllor.
Yes, this is a shorter chapter, like you said, but it is Arya for the first time in a long time being Arya Stark for a chapter, because we ended her last chapter talking about, hey, I am Arya Stark, and she was no longer Weasel or whatever other name that they ended up giving her as she rode along in secrecy with Hot Pie and Gendry. And we do say bye to Hot Pie, which is a bit sad. And you can see that Arya had been kind of mean to Hot Pie at multiple times during the story, but clearly has some form of attachment to her as well, which I think does make Arya. I like Arya as a character, because even though she's a bit edgy and a little bit prickly, you do see her good nature from time to time. Just like with Sansa being very snooty, but still thinks of Arya, even if it's subconsciously, in a positive light at times as well. So I think it's one of the things that kind of redeem Arya at some points. Plus, just the fact that she's went through so much as a character as well. I want to interject real quick and just let everybody know next week is Samwell 1, and we would love for people to reach out to us as we're doing right now with Arya. We're going to go through the chapter, then we're going to talk about maybe what other people have said about it, but we would like to hear what you, our listeners, think about these chapters as well, and feature that at the end of our episode. So next week, when we're going over Samwell 1, if you read up ahead and you have some thoughts about the chapter, theories, or really anything at all, send us a raven. Send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com or bendthekneepodcast.com and let us know, and we will read your take on the chapter at the end of the episode. But let's get back to this Arya chapter here. So my favorite thing about this chapter, Matt, is just how awesome the Brotherhood Without Banners is. Like, we get a real representation of who they are, what their goal is, why are they doing what they're doing, and they stand for the small folk. And that is
King Robert.
King Robert, the original Hand. This is a cause I can get behind, and I like this because I think it's also fairly realistic, that especially with how wild things have gotten in Westeros, and there's 5 king, there's all this stuff, that there would be someone that would want to represent the working class in Westeros as well. So I love the Brotherhood Without Banners. I think it's also kind of underlined with a bit of, not mystery per se, but a little bit of nuance in the fact that they are taking prisoners. Unfortunately, one of them happens to be Arya here, and they do have their own motivations as well, which might not always align with the best case scenario for our characters that we do enjoy. So I think it makes them not just like do-gooders, white knights. There's a little bit of an undercurrent of something else there as well, and their own selfish motivations, but I like them quite a bit, and I love hearing anything about Thoros of Myr and Beric Dondarrion.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting about Beric, and we'll get to him. There's like this is like you said, this is kind of a short chapter, so there's not a ton to break down from it. But
Mhm.
and I want to get your thoughts on here, Jimmy, about this. When they're talking about what's happened to Beric and Darian,
Mhm.
right? Do you think that all of the members of the Brotherhood Without Banners know that Thoros is actually resurrecting him, or do you think some of it, or do you think it's possible that some just think, oh, he got injured?
I think just like the reader in this chapter, we are probably doubting it a little bit, and not looking ahead and knowing what we know. We're like, okay, so he
If
removed
you
the
were
thing.
reading this for the first time, yeah.
Yeah, he removed a lance, right? I think it says a lance that was like 2 feet embedded into his chest or something like this, and he felt even better the next morning. And it's like that might be something you say to someone to try to give them the will to live through such a devastating injury. Like, you look better than ever, Barrick. Uh, but then you hear multiple accounts of him being cut down and this and that. And I imagine it's probably pretty split. I imagine the people who have visually seen him come back from these things are believers, and then the other ones who have joined up and maybe not have seen it or only seen certain ones probably don't. And I think as readers, the first time through, we're also thinking that and doubting it, because a lot of stuff in this series is interpreted as magic or something fantastical, and it ends up being a little bit more mundane. However, I think it's pretty clear that there's something up with Thoros of Myr and something going on with Beric Dondarrion. And we know this because in Feast for Crows, we see Thoros say that he would not give the kiss to Lady Stoneheart when they found Catelyn. He did not want to do it. And then that's when Beric Dondarrion passed the flame of life to Catelyn's corpse instead. And the so-called Lady Stoneheart now leads the Brotherhood after Beric's passing. And this is actually going against Thoros's best wishes, and it's kind of put him in a weird spot where he's like, I didn't really agree to follow a zombie lady. This isn't exactly what we were after from the get-go. So the Brother Without Banners kind of changes over the next 2-3 books, which is really fascinating, and a lot of it has to do with the application of this, whatever this is, this fantastical element, whether it's religious based or it's blood magic based or whatever it might be. It causes a change within the Brotherhood. So I think as a first time reader, you look at this and you're probably doubting it, but little do we know that Beric Dondarrion is kind of unkillable, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I'm going to read it right here too. I mean, I saw the mountain slay Raymond Derry with a single blow so terrible that it took Derry's arm off at the elbow and killed the horse beneath him. Glad Wild died there with him, and Lord Mallory was ridden down and drowned. We had lions on every side, and I thought I was doomed with the rest, but Alan shouted commands and restored order to our ranks. And those still a horse rallied around Thoros, and we cut our way free. 60 we'd been that morning. By dark, no more than 20 were left, and Lord Beric was gravely wounded. Thoros drew a foot of lance from his chest that night and poured boiling wine into the hole it left. Every man of us was certain his lordship would be dead by daybreak, but Thoros prayed with him all night beside the fire, and when dawn came, he was still alive and stronger than he'd been. It was a fortnight before he could mount a horse, but his courage kept us strong. He told us that our war had not ended at the Mummers Ford, but only begun there, and that every man of ours who'd fallen would be avenged tenfold. By then, the fighting had passed us on. The mountains men were only in the van of Lord Tywin's host. They crossed the Red Fork in strength and swept up into the Riverlands, burning everything in their path. We were so few that all we could do was hurry their rear, but we told each other we'd join up with King Robert when he marched west to crush Lord Tywin's rebellion. Only then we heard that Robert was dead, and Lord Eddard as well, and Cersei Lannister's whelp had ascended the Iron Throne. They turned the whole world on its head. We'd been sent out by the king's hand to deal with outlaws, you see, but now we're the outlaws.
Yeah, they were in a rock and a hard place, and I think that they wanted to try to do the just thing. And also, these people are out in the land, like they're seeing what is happening. They seeing what the mountain has done, and they are saying this isn't right. The new people in
Yeah.
charge are corrupt all along. I think it's also very telling in this chapter that I think it was Harwin. I might be wrong about this, but essentially, they're talking about the 6 Winterfell men that remained of the 20 her father had sent with Beric Dondarrion. Harwin told her, and they were scattered. It was a trap, me lady. And then he talks about how the whole mountain thing going across the land and raising the farms and raiding and all this stuff was on purpose so that Eddard Stark would ride out himself and then be captured or killed to trade for Tyrion. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you think it's true?
Yeah, I probably do.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
Because remember, Ned Stark is still alive. He just got captured.
Yes. And this
So
is before
Tywin was
Robb
already
went to war.
right. Yeah, Tywin was already planning this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to amass troops and an army and everything. So that was already in the works when Catelyn captures Tyrion.
Yes.
But then remember, Tyrion shows up at the camp. So then he still knows what's going on.
So this is a really good example.
But at that point, it's Robb. He's fighting Robb.
Yeah. So at this point in the story, Tyrion would have been captured, and Robb hadn't went to war yet because Eddard's alive, right? So this is a really good example of Tywin not trusting his children and it coming back to bite him. If he would just let Jaime know, hey, this is the plan. Like, we're going to capture Eddard Stark, make a trade for Tyrion, and then try to patch this thing. I don't think he would have killed Eddard at this point in the story, actually. I think that would have been a really bad move for the Lannisters because Tywin didn't want to go to war. I don't think Tywin was like, I am really excited about going to war with the entire North. I don't think that was his plan.
Well, that honestly might have been a really stupid move.
To capture him or to kill him? Because I think killing
that actually raises another question too. Did Tywin know that Cersei was going to kill Robert?
Ooh.
Because you have to think about that for a second. For Tywin to say, I want to capture Ned Stark, who is Hand of the King at that time, and Robert is still alive at that time, right? Tywin would be going directly against Robert and capturing Ned Stark. So did Tywin know that Cersei was planning on killing Robert? Because if that doesn't happen, then Robert's not going to be too happy because he will always side with Ned before I mean, maybe not always, but I felt like he would have sided with Ned and been like even more furious about the whole thing.
I like what you're saying there because without the confirmation that Robert is not going to be king anymore, you're right. I mean, that's a move against the crown at that point. And Robert certainly,
because it all kind of happens all at once.
Yes, these are it's a domino effect. You move one piece out, it's not going to work. So I'm with you. The only thing that gives me pause about Tywin knowing is the fact that they don't mention it in any of their conversations. That makes me pause a little bit because we get a lot of Cersei Tywin conversations post Robert's death, and they never really mention it, at least not that I remember. I don't think there's any hints towards him knowing that. Also, I would argue that Tywin possibly would not have wanted Robert dead. Like, Robert dying wasn't really good for the realm, was it? And not to mention that his grandchildren were going to inherit the throne anyway. So there's no reason to really expedite Robert's death from Tywin's perspective, unless if he is worried about the incest coming out, which is definitely possible. There's a lot of angles to this.
So I just want to make sure I knew this. I had this timing right. Yeah, because when Eddard does that, when he sits on the throne, right?
And Robert's away. Yes.
Robert's away hunting. So it's all kind of like happening at once.
I don't know, dude.
I feel like maybe Tywin knew.
There's a chance he knew. There's a chance. And maybe he didn't explicitly know. Maybe it's one of those things where Varys maybe heard Cersei over time. You know what I mean? Like, maybe Tywin had an agent somewhere and he knows. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What we should really pay attention to,
you do get, and again, this is another thing that's not in the books. It's in the show, and it's a great scene. Is Tywin talking to Jaime about like the name is what matters? Remember when he's cutting up the boar or whatever?
It's a stag,
you know, we might be. But you get. Yeah, but you get some of that tone comes out more and you see it in the show as well, but you get it in the books, you get when Tyrion's there. Like, he's sitting in on the council with Tyrion. and they're saying, here's what we're going to do. And Tyrion's like, I've got my Moon clan with me, and they'll help fight before that battle comes up. So, but he does have some of that conversation with Tyrion.
Yeah.
So he is kind of talking about like the importance of the Lannister line.
Yeah, certainly. But I guess my only thing is like,
I'm saying, is there like a hidden agenda there?
Well, maybe, but his kids were going to inherit the throne anyways, right? Like Tommen or Joffrey, whoever it might have been, is in it. He's half Lannister. Was Tywin aware of the incest?
He's full. I think he had to have been.
I think he was. I think he knew what was going on. I don't know if he knew that the kids were.
I think he did. I think he did.
You think?
Yeah, I 100% think he did.
I
think he never wanted to admit it. He's really never in the books. That's another thing too. In the books, he's never really kind of challenged with that.
No,
like that. I mean, still, still the book version of the character has to. But he's now. I can't remember if he's directly challenged with that in the books. I don't believe he is.
I don't think he is, but
because we don't get any like Cersei chapters where because in the show it's like Cersei's like, well, you have to know what's going on. He's like, don't like speak of that.
Yeah, I feel
because actually that's another character who is way less prevalent actually in the books is Tywin. Actually, seeing him.
Yeah, he's more of a. I mean, he is an authority. Yeah, he is an authority figure, and yeah, you know what? This is very interesting to me. And we talked about this last week about just how important information spread and travel is the key to this series and a lot of the drama behind it. And this is a really good example of that.
Yeah. Okay, real quick here before we move on here. So I just want to talk quickly about the Brotherhood Without Banners because they're out here, by the way, and they're they're fighting the good fight for Robert without knowing he's gone. It's kind of like when you hear stories of like people who like I know there's like a Japanese guy who was like stranded on an island and thought that World War II was going on for like years and years and years. It's kind of like that, right? Where it's like these people that are like they're out there in the middle of like nowhere and they feel like the war is still. It's not, man. War is not going on, right? But they're out there like thinking that it is.
And they're living in another reality. I saw a really funny YouTube short. This guy, he does like different time periods in history, and they were doing like the 1800s. And he's like, my wife died 3 months ago. I can't believe how fast news travels these days. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like the 3 months, that's pretty quick. I mean, we see that with Daenerys as well, being overseas. She doesn't learn Robert's dead till far after we do. And then also Rob's engagement. That's another thing that takes a long time to get back to Catelyn because she's locked into a castle and he's been away at war. So, the Brotherhood Without Banners for a good while there, we were fighting with the assumption that Robert was still alive.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick here. So as we move on to some of these next line, right? So they're talking about what's going on here. The whole world turned on its head. We'd been set up at the king's hand to deal with the outlaws, but you see we're the outlaws, and Lord Tywin was now hand of the king. There was something some wanted to yield then. Lord Beric wouldn't hear of it. We were still king's men, he said, and these were the king's people. The lions were savaging. If we could not fight for Robert, we would fight for them until every man was dead, or so we did. But as we fought, something queer happened. For every man we lost, 2 showed up to take his place. A few were knights or squirrels of gentle birth, but most were common men, field hands and fiddlers and innkeepers, servants and shoemakers, even 2 septons. Many, all sorts, and women too, children's dogs. Dogs, said Arya. Aye, Harwin grinned. One of our lads kept the meanest dog you'd ever want to see. I wish I had a good mean dog, said Arya. A lion-killing dog. She'd had a direwolf once, but she'd thrown rocks at her until she fled to keep the queen from killing her. Could a direwolf kill a lion? She wondered. So there's like an insane amount of breakdown just from like that one little thing. Obviously, this is hinting so much at the Hound because she will get a good mean dog here in a little bit when she gets to travel with the Hound, a lion killing dog, who is what the Hound has become. And then also kind of like, then a little bit more of the who am I really. She had a dire wolf once, like she was once a dire wolf, but now she is kind of becoming her own thing, right? And she goes on later too, and I was trying to find it there at the beginning, but I can't. But I'm sure we'll get to it. But there's a part in here where she's talking about getting captured, and she's like, "Well, they're only capturing me because I'm Arya Stark."
Yes, this
But they
chapter is
did
very much about what that means for her. Yeah.
right, like they wouldn't capture me if I were, Ari the boy, or
Weasel
all
or
the other Weasel, or all of these other names. I couldn't find that in my text, but it's in here somewhere. But again, so you have that as well, and then here also again challenging sort of her own identity with, kind of like, I was a direwolf once, and then at one point she's rubbing the coin, and then another point she's thinking of what Sirio taught her, like calm as water.
Mhm.
So she's still in this kind of transition period where she doesn't know exactly who she is or who
Yes.
she's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. And this is chapter, like I said, is the first time in a long time she's been Arya Stark to the people around her. And we very quickly realize that the weight that comes with being a highborn noble daughter is not good in this circumstance. And because of that, she is now a new pawn for another player to play with. And I think she quickly goes back to wishing that she was someone else. And I don't know if you can necessarily blame her. I mean, we get tugs from, like you said, Jack and Har, Syria Farrell, the whole nine. And I think she would prefer to have been maybe away like Nymeria was, who she had driven away. She's probably a little bit thankful for that at some point too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and then of course, obviously the big thing of the lion killing dog, thinking, I wish I had a dog, not a wolf.
Yep.
Like, she does think about that too, but she wants specifically a lion killing dog. And then also, could a dire wolf kill a lion? That's kind
Yeah.
of something to think too, and she's thinking about the queen too. If I
Mhm.
had a wolf, or if I had so when she thinks here too, so she's like, it's kind of interesting. I want a lion killing dog, and then thinks, is it possible actually for a wolf to kill a dog? But first she thinks I could have a dog that could kill so like that's kind of an interesting
Oh, it's definitely
just
foreshadowing for the
play
Hound.
right, but it's just kind of also an interesting play on words too, that she thinks more about a dog being able to do it instead of thinking that a wolf can do it. It's like she thinks at first about, like, I want a dog that can kill a lion, and then thinks, is it possible for a wolf to do so? So it still is kind of, in a way, you see kind of how far removed she is from the wolf identity.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And if a dog can kill a lion, you have to assume a dire wolf could kill a lion, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure a wolf could kill a lion in the first place.
I mean, they're pretty a dire
I
wolf
mean,
is
I'm not.
scary.
I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I
Easily.
would say not. I would, I think there are. It's possible. I mean, it might be like 70-30 lion, but I don't count wolves out.
Here's the thing: if it's a pack of wolves, it's a different story. And
Yeah,
Arya needs to find her pack again.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, I mean, lions are pretty cool, but at the same time, they're also like, how are they the king of the jungle when they live in like the desert? They live in like the Sahara, and they don't live in
Mm.
that's not the actual jungle. The jungle is like jaguars and stuff.
I mean, do
I
they
think
live in
lions
the
are a little I
jungle?
think lions are a little overrated.
So you're saying they're running for office, but they're not living where they're running for office?
Yeah, man.
It's time to impeach
If
lions.
you put a jaguar and a lion in the jungle, who's walking out? I'm saying the jaguar. That's its home turf.
You think?
Yes.
Dude, lions are scary as hell, though. Have you ever watched a lion kill somebody? This got dark
No.
real quick, but I've seen videos of lions mauling people, and it's like, bro. Like, I have a cat, so I like to think of my cat as like a little version of that. And
Mhm.
like the way that it plays with its stuffed flamingo is how a lion plays with a human. It's like horrific. But I mean, I'm not saying that a jaguar or leopard or whatever couldn't also do the same thing. I don't know. We might have to have a battle royale. This turned into Animal Planet real quick.
Well, I'm just looking it up here. How big are dire wolves?
That's what I was gonna say. If we're talking about a dire wolf is massive, like the
Well,
size of
like, you know, the fan like a fantasy dire wolf. I mean, those things like, you know, we
yeah,
see
they're
here are
literally like massive. Yeah,
yeah. But so says here the dire, you know, the dire wolves that did exist, because they just find fossils of them. So obviously these are ones that lived. But back then, like saber-tooth tigers were pretty big and stuff too. So said the skull could reach up to 12 inches in length, and its teeth were larger and more robust, obviously. In terms of body size, the dire wolf was on average the size of like large gray wolves, with shoulder height of 38 inches and a body of 69 inches. That's pretty freaking big.
yeah, pretty stacked.
A dire wolf
I'm
definitely could take a lion.
I mean, it would definitely happen every now and then. I think it's like when Vince Young beat the USC Trojans. It's like,
Right.
yeah, he
Under
did
the
it, but could he have done it
under
again?
yeah, under the right circumstances.
And if there's a pack of them, it's a wrap.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Lions don't really hunt in packs.
Do they not?
Well, I think it's just a couple.
I mean, a couple lions is worth a lot. Like 2 or 3 lions walking down the road, I'm running.
Well, I don't want anything to do with them. Any animals. I don't even like like I don't even go to the fair because like those like big, like, you ever see draft horses? Those things freak me out.
Horses are intimidating, man. They're
I don't like them.
specimens. You don't like
They,
horses?
dude, if one of those things kicks you, you're dead. I don't like any animal that's larger than me. I'm out on.
I can
So
understand.
I don't know what kind of dog Arya is talking about here with a lion killing dog, but that's gonna be a pretty big ass dog.
Some would say it's a hound.
Well, still.
But
All right, let's continue.
so,
here.
anyways, they find out that
Yeah.
Jamie has been freed from River Run.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is pretty big deal. Again, we're talking about information not getting around quick enough. That happened towards the beginning of this book, really at the end of Clash of Kings. And Arya is just now figuring it out. And whenever she hears Kingslayer, the hair on the back of her neck stands up. She held her breath to listen. And then they go through it. Kind of interesting. Tom of Sevens is here, who is getting in and out of River Run later whenever it's occupied by Lannister forces later in A Feast for Crows, which is kind of neat. But yeah, they end up getting this and this information, and it's a bit of a doozy for everyone to digest.
Yeah, Arya is scared because they talk about how you know, she feels the hair on her neck stand up when she's like, "What? The Kingslayer has been freed?
Mm-hmm.
Could that be true? I will not believe it," said the one-eyed man. The other's outlaw called him Jack B. Lucky, but the losing an eye didn't seem very lucky to Arya. I've had you know, and so they say the wolves will drown in blood if the Kingslayer's loose again.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
Things are
too.
worse than it appeared. Things have really drastically changed. Arya, and they end up singing. Tom is doing his thing, and then Arya falls asleep and has a dream that is of some importance to me. She dreamt of home, not River Run, but Winterfell. It was not a good dream, though. She was alone outside the castle, up to her knees in mud. She could see the gray walls ahead of her, but when she tried to reach the gates, every step seemed harder than the one before, and the castle faded before her until it looked more like smoke than granite. And there were wolves as well, gaunt gray shapes stalking through the trees all around her, their eyes shining. Whenever she looked at them, she remembered the taste of blood. So I think this has a ton of foreshadowing here. Talking about the gray walls, maybe the gray joys, Theon Greyjoy taking Winterfell. And then right after that, she thinks that it looked more like smoke than granite. We know Winterfell ends up getting burned to the ground. And then wolves, who you would imagine would be friendly, look like gaunt gray shapes stalking through the trees all around her, their eyes shining. And whenever she looked at them, to remember the taste of blood, I think this is foreshadowing the fact that the wolves men, or the Starks men, the Boltons, are going to eventually turn on them and come around them like a pack of wolves, which all gets capped off with Robb having his wolf's head tied to his body, which is pretty gruesome stuff.
Yeah, and I think if you go back to that line we were talking about just before, like that the wolves will drown in their own blood if the Kingslayer is loose again. I feel like that is actually kind of like a little foreshadowing to what happens to Catelyn, where she is thrown into the river, and you know. And
Yeah.
you could argue in some way she does drown in her own blood because her throat's slit. So
Yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this chapter for sure. I mean, from the Hound's perspective to Lady Catelyn, also setting up the fact that Lady Stoneheart can happen by, Beric Dondarrion and how he's been resurrected. But Arya's dream is very ominous and unfortunately very applicable to the future she's about to experience.
yeah. And so just a little bit further here. So they're going, right? And she sees the way they're going and she's thinking, we're going the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Gendry moaned, what is it, Moss again? Look at the sun, she said. We're going south. Arya rummaged in her saddlebag for the map so she could show them. We should have never left the Trident. See, she unrolled the map on her leg, and all of them were looking at her now. See, there's River Run between the rivers. As it happens, said Jack Be Lucky, we know where River Run is. You're not going to River Run, Lem told her. And she thinks, I was almost there, Arya thought. I should have. And it's so bad because then she does get there. She gets there, and it's like, no, this isn't where you want to be. I mean, it's,
There's
it's
something
bad.
like that builds dread and like stress in me when I read this stuff. Have you ever been on a trip and like you've been driving for like 30 minutes after you took an exit to like go pee or pick up some food, and then all of a sudden you're like, I think we're going the wrong way. And when someone says that, you think about all the time you've wasted and how further you are from your destination. And in this term, it would be safety. Like, I don't know why, but this like builds stress in me as a reader, especially because she mentions it earlier in the chapter about the moss and then gets confirmation with the sun following that. And you're like, no, she was right all along. And it's just like, why didn't anyone listen to her? Like,
I know.
ugh, I feel so bad.
I know. Well, that's honestly a big part of Arya's story. I mean, she can see her dad get beheaded, but she's too far away. There's nothing, like there's nothing she can do. She almost feels like somebody who's like she's just reaching, constantly reaching,
And
and it's
never
just
in
like
control of her own destiny.
can never grab it. She's always like so one of the people who's like she's always so close, but she just can't grab it.
Yeah, and ultimately Arya's story becomes one about her empowering herself and making her own decisions, and the coin that she's rubbing in her pocket represents the future that she will eventually take hold for herself and the skills that she'll also acquire. So, I mean, Arya's story is about a child in medieval fantasy world that has absolutely zero say of what happens to her truly. The only decision she's made thus far, which has probably felt pretty liberating, even though it's damaging to her, is that she killed someone. And she killed again at Harrenhal to escape. And it seems like the only freedom she's ever had, or choice, really, agency, has been through taking other people's lives. It's a pretty traumatic thing to put a 9-year-old through.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even you can go back. I mean, when she's training with Syrio, she's finally got something she likes.
That's right.
But it's taken from her.
Yeah.
The wolf. She had the wolf. It was taken from her. I mean, that's that. Yeah, that's one of the things. So from her, it's everything she wants is taken from her. So now it's time for her to start taking from others.
Yes, she wants to be in control of her life and where she can go, where she can't go, and eventually her taking that ship to Bravos is exactly that decision.
Yeah. See, that's why. Not that I want to go do a super deep dive into this, but like I was fine with Arya being the one to kill the Night King in the show.
Yeah, that's like my hottest take from season 8 is that I actually didn't necessarily mind it that much.
I didn't like how quickly it happened, where it just feels like Melisandre showed up and then because she did have that conversation with Arya, and it felt like Arya should have been the one foreshadowed to do it the whole time.
With that, we know that the worst part is that their justification for it was just not good enough, and it was simply because we didn't want Jon Snow to have too many moments.
Right, which is stupid.
Subversion for subversion's sake is garbage. That's
But if it ends up being Arya to be the one to kill, say, Euron Greyjoy or whoever the big final villain is going to be, it's like, well, she's been training for this her entire time. Yes. She learns how to sword fight. She trains with the Hound. I mean, regardless, George is building her for some epic moment where she's going to have a fight against somebody.
Yes,
and it's gonna be pretty sweet, I'm imagining.
Yeah, and also just her abilities in general are very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think about all the training she's got. I mean, but she's going to be, I mean, in Winds of Winter or A Dream for Spring, Arya is going to do something that's going to be freaking sweet because she's going to have
Yeah.
I mean, you could almost argue that Arya, by the end of the series, might be like the most powerful fighter ever.
It's also George's wife's favorite character.
Right.
She made him promise not to kill her off too soon. So there is there is that
Right.
going
I
for her
mean,
as well.
yeah, you think about it. I mean, by the end of this thing, in all seriousness, I know we often think like Arthur Dane and stuff like that, but by the end of this, Arya might be like number one, and she might be like OP compared to everybody else.
She's a faceless man or a faceless girl or woman at this point. It's like
Right.
faceless men are like,
Right.
I mean, they're
she doesn't have a Valyrian steel sword, but she has a special sword, so that's really good. She's trained with Cyril Farrell, who was one of the top, just class swordsmen that existed. And then, all that just learning from the Hound to learn. I mean, I'm sure he taught her about fighting and everything. That's why actually another scene that I thought was kind of cool in the show was the Arya versus Brienne of Tarth scene. It was just a cool little fight scene. And that could still happen. She could have a fight like that with somebody. And then, yeah, if she gets that Valyrian steel dagger at the end, she could still get that Valyrian steel dagger. That could be, then it could be pretty sweet.
Yeah, and not to harp on the show, but one of the biggest issues was that they stripped fantastical elements out of the show, but kept in Arya's and then didn't know how to handle it in the final season because pretty much everything with Dany could have been handled by Arya very easily. And actually maybe even avoided a lot of the confrontation because she could share faces.
Right.
Cersei could have been killed.
And to be fair, like the her running at like super fast speed or something where she just like sneaks by the White Walkers without them like not noticing anything, like that was like a power that was given on the fly. Like she had never done anything like that, and she just suddenly could, like, that was never explained.
She turned into a rogue.
Like being a faceless man means you put on somebody else's face and you're now kind of like in disguise. It doesn't mean you're invisible.
That's right. And it's also like that's the thing. Like what I had expected to happen in season 8 was I expected her to wear Jaime's face and kill Cersei, therefore doing the Valonqar prophecy in a weird way, which is what George is known for, is taking like prophecies and kind of subverting them a bit, but still like technically fulfilling them. So I thought Arya wearing Jaime's face possibly would be her taking Cersei's life, fulfilling that or whatever. I know that there's the prettier queen. Who knows? Maybe Arya will be queen. Who knows?
Yeah. So here she tries actually to do some of that stuff, right? Says Arya took a breath to still her soul. This is when she's trying to escape. Calm and still as water. She glanced at the outlaws on the horses and turned her horse's head. Now, as quick as a snake, she thought, and she slammed her heels into the courser's flank, right between Greenbeard and Jack B. Lucky. She flew and caught one glimpse of Gendry's startled face as his mare moved out of the way. And then she was in the open field and running north or south, east or west. That made no matter now. She could find the way to River Run later once she'd lost them. Arya leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to gallop. Behind her, the outlaws were cursing and shouting at her to come back. She shut her ears to the calls, but when she glanced back over her shoulders, 4 of them were coming after her. Angai and Harwin, Greenbeard racing side by side with Lem further back, his big yellow cloak flapping behind him as he rode. Swift as a deer, she told her mount, run, now run. And then ultimately, she ends up getting captured.
Yes. And her Bruce Lee mindset does not work, unfortunately for her. And it just ends up not going great, which is sad. Basically, I think you can tell right from the get-go that this is not going to work out for her. And it's also sad because I feel like Harwin was her feeling safe enough to come out as Arya Stark, and then realizing that using that information that Harwin is now holding her captive. It's a heartbreaking betrayal in a lot of ways, even if I think she can kind of understand why Harwin's doing what he's doing. It's just sad.
Yeah. And then one line I want to pull out here is it just goes on and she's just running. And it just sort of gets more frantic and frantic. It almost sounds like a dream, really. Like, how big are these woods? She's racing. I need to find the fields again. I need to find a road. Instead, she found a game trail. You could almost argue that right there is Arya's entire story. I need to find this, but instead she finds something else. And then it continues on. There's one more little line here. As she's running through like bushes and things like that. Thorns scratched her face like the cats she used to chase in King's Landing, which tiny little
the canals.
cat by the canals, that will come back in too. So that's then she, again, no, she thought he can't, not him. It isn't fair when Harwin is gaining on her.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it shows that the landscape has changed drastically. And her first day back or a few days back of being Arya Stark officially didn't go so well. It's very similar to Sansa, right? Sansa's now being treated well and being treated as a lady of higher class at the palace just in the chapter prior. And by the end of it, she realizes that she's just a pawn, and Arya is also a pawn.
Yeah. And then it sort of finishes up here with that line I was thinking, I talked about earlier. Yes. This is Harwin talking about, we mean your brother Rob no ill, milady, but that's not him we fight for. He has an army of his own and many a great lord to bend the knee. The small folk only have us. He gave her a searching look. Can you understand what I'm telling you? Yes, that he was not Rob's man. She understood well enough, and that she was his captive. I could have stayed with Hot Pie. We could have even taken the little boat and sailed up to River Run. She had been better off as Squab, and no one would take Squab captive, or Nan, or Weasel, or Ari, the orphan boy. I was a wolf, she thought, but now I'm just some stupid little lady again. So she even kind of disassociates being like a lady with being a wolf. Like she kind of, disconnects those two.
Yeah, and in some ways she lost a piece of her pack too. Like her new pack. Hot Pie's gone.
Right. He's gone, man.
Yeah, poor Arya. And it's not going to get much better for her in this book.
Yeah. She says, I'll ride peacefully for now.
For now. Still keeping that vengeance in the back of her mind.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts about this chapter here, Jimmy?
No, great chapter. Love Arya. Very much so. Love the Brotherhood Without Banners. Love getting their explanation. And Thoros of Mir, who we will see shortly, is one of my favorite side characters in the series. And I love his kind of moral dilemma he comes into once Lady Stoneheart enters the picture towards the end of this book. And then we see him again in Feast for Crows. So good stuff. Very, very good stuff. But next week, I'm more excited because it's one of my favorite characters, which is Samwell. And I think Samwell chapters are so much better than people give him credit for. And I'm thrilled to be with the Leslie Knope of Westeros once again next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Next time we will be into Samwell 1, as you said, beginning to get a new perspective of things up there at the wall and the north, right? The true north beyond the wall as well, with the free folk, as we, we're pushing that here. The wildlings it's a derogatory term.
That's right. No more.
And I'm sick of it. So the free folk. Okay.
The free folk.
Yeah. So we will be with Samwell, and it's a new POV character. We haven't had a new POV character since Jaime, but now we are getting a new POV, so a new perspective.
Yeah, and very important one because we haven't been seeing what's going on at the wall because Jon has went so far north and joined the free folk. So very important, and I love Samwell as a character. I think he's a lot more important than people get him credit for, and definitely a POV that I'm happy that was included.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we said, we want to thank you guys for playing our Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing A Storm of Swords, Samwell 1. So, as we said earlier, if you guys want to send us ravens, like over this weekend or whatever, about like your thoughts about that chapter, we'll try to get them included into the show next week. So, if you guys read ahead and have a thought about it, shoot us an email, and then we can get that included.
Absolutely. And, we usually record on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, depending on the schedule. So as long as you get it in before then, we would be able to include it in the episode. And also, if you have any thoughts about the Arya chapter, include those as well. We can kick off our next episode with some reprisals, I guess, of maybe things we got wrong or whatnot. But yeah, we would love to hear more from you. And if you end up liking the podcast and you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, or leave a comment, or send us a raven about anything at btkcast@gmail.com or bendthekneepodcast.com.
Yeah, those are great places to tell us that there's no way in hell a lion would lose to a wolf.
Exactly.
Right, or a jaguar. So
exactly.
With that, we will see you next time. And remember that winter is coming.